All right, everybody, it looks like I am going live. It looks like the computer is working and everything is working. So let me get started by playing my intro video and then we will get going. Okay, guys, so tonight I want to really focus on the threat of terrorism, what is going on in the United States. We see a lot of lawlessness going on, and I do want to center down somewhat on China and what is going on with China. It's a very interesting story, what's going on with them right now, and I think you'll be very interested in it, especially because spiritually, the way we see things happening, we see what Jesus predicted, and the end times would be a time of lawlessness, and we see that lawlessness all over the United States. We see it every day. I mean, there's a new thing every single day that comes out that shows how hardened, criminal, lawless people can be in the United States, and obviously we see this around the world. And so the scriptures that I want to bring up here at the beginning is in Matthew 24, which is kind of the big picture of the end times. And so I want to bring this up because when we look at the world, we see a lot of wars and rumors of wars. So, what did Jesus say about this? And so, beginning in verse 1 of Matthew 24, says, Jesus came out from the temple, was going away when his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. And he said to them, do you not see all these things? Truly, I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down. And so the prophecy of Daniel 9, Jesus is predicting is going to come true because the temple was going to be torn down. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed in 70 AD. And so he is bringing up this prophecy. And they ask him a question in verse 3. They said, as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us when these things will be. What will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age? So that's a very interesting question by them. I'm not sure that they really understood the question they were asking because they did not really ever communicate up to this point that they understood the prophecies of the end times. They didn't even understand the prophecies of Jesus' first coming. But they did know that Messiah had to take over the world and rule the world in the kingdom age. And so they at least knew that. So Jesus gives them this answer, and it's very telling to what we've seen over the last 2,000 years. Jesus answered and said to them, see to it that no one misleads you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. And so when you go to First John, John understood this because the Holy Spirit drove him to write there are many antichrists, and the one that was living in that day was Caesar. I mean, Caesar said he was God. Everybody has to say, Caesar is Lord, that kind of thing. That's an antichrist type formation of government. And so they understood that one. They understood that they were in a fight, and Christians, after the resurrection, were in that fight many times, and they refused to say Caesar is Lord. They said Jesus is Lord. Many of them were killed because of that. And he said, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. And you will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. Let me just say, for the last 2,000 years, you've had wars, you've had rumors of wars. And we, from the 20th century to today, we had World War One, we had World War Two, we had the Third World War in a sense with the Cold War, right? And after 1991, everything kind of changed. And what that change was that we had a drawdown of troops. Some guy wrote, a book, The End of History. America beat the Soviet Union. The Warsaw Pact came down. La la la. But the really mistake was in a worldview kind of sense. They misunderstood that our enemies did not go away. They just shift tactics. And the way they shifted tactics is very similar to what the Muslims did. What the Muslims did is they realized, if you're going to fight Israel, you can't fight them head on. If you go head on, army against army, you're going to lose. And they lost 48, 49. They lost 56, 67, 73. Then they changed tactics. And this is what happened. All of the communists changed tactics. And they changed tactics by not developing head on head, army on army, like World War II, like Vietnam, but they went and said, no, we're going to do this by asymmetrical warfare. And that is what the Muslims are doing today. What they do is they use terrorists. You come in, a guy comes in, and he's, in a blue jeans and a t-shirt, pulls out a gun and starts shooting everybody, innocent civilians in a store, right? And they're lone wolf terrorists, October 7th type, types of attacks. And so when Jesus said that there would be wars and rumors of wars, we see that increasing. He said, see to it that you are not frightened, for those things must take place, but it's not yet the end. So things are going to go up. The end will be at Armageddon when all the nations finally in the world come together and God himself brings them together to judge them, as Joel 3 talks about, as Revelation 19 talks about, okay? Then he says, the nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. And those of us who studied history know this is the reality of all of human history. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. This is what's been happening. And then verse 8, he says, but all these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. And so you see those birth pangs bursting out here in America, in the Middle East, Russia with Ukraine, China with Taiwan and all of her neighbors, the threats that she just made against Australia. They were practicing their invasion of Taiwan. They went towards Australia. They started a live fire exercise called Australia after they fired their missiles. Okay, think about that. To put them in fear. And then, so Australia knows it was a live fire exercise and wasn't them firing their missiles at Australia. And guys, this just happened. And then they took their ships and went all the way around Australia in a just threatening move to say, Australia, you're dead meat, basically, in our hands. And so when they were practicing to attack Taiwan here a few weeks ago, those are the types of things those are wars, rumors of wars. We know that they want Taiwan. The interesting thing about Taiwan is not theirs. It's this stupid idea that's against all of history that China owns Taiwan. Well, Taiwan was more dominated by Japan more in history than it ever was by China. So I don't quite understand their belief. I don't quite understand the United States' blindness and stupidity going along with this China view since Nixon. I mean, it was a terrible thing Nixon did, and it's been a curse ever since. The things that he did in trying to engage China and this belief that if you open up the markets of China economically, they will leave communism. Well, that's never worked, and they've never given up their hope and their dream to dominate the world and destroy the United States of America. And so this beginning of this passage of scripture here, which Jesus gives us this picture that there's going to be birth pangs and things are growing. At the same time, we see revivals busting out all over the world, right? And so that gives me the picture. God is up to something. You know, the rapture is coming soon. We are in a time where spiritually we're seeing more and more people come to Christ. I'm doing 25 baptisms next week with our students. And so, you know, God is on the move and we're seeing some great things happening. And so, and I want to jump down here. He says in verse 12, because lawlessness is increased, most people's love will grow cold. Is that not a picture of the evening news in the United States for a long time, but especially now? And we can get into that here in a little bit. The other verse I want to hit is Psalms 83. And you've heard of the Psalm 83 war and what's going to go on with that. Many people have talked about it, but I want to just take the first few verses and the prayer here. The prayer that is being prayed by Asaph is a prayer we should be praying today for Israel because their land is being divided again. They are being pushed to accept a ceasefire and a peace deal, which I believe is an impossibility. And I believe it's because the scriptures say it. And so when I pray this prayer every night for Israel, and I pray Isaiah 62 every night, these verses are so realistic in its reality, its biblical reality of what is happening right now. And the tie to China, the tie to Russia, to North Korea, to Venezuela, to Cuba, all of these groups is that we call it a red-green alliance, okay? Even Mexico. And they are united together, communism, Islam, the Islamic jihadist groups, for the takeover of the world. And so here's what the verses say. It says, "O God, do not remain quiet, do not be silent, and, O God, do not be still." So the prayer is, God, speak, but God, move. Okay, God, speak, God, move. Why? Okay, here's the why. For behold, your enemies make an uproar, and those who hate you have exalted themselves. Guys, that's the European Union. That's the UN. That's the Organization of Islamic Countries. That is almost everywhere. That's China. That's Russia. These are all these groups who hate, they make an uproar, and they hate Israel, and they hate Christians, and they want to murder Christians, and they want to murder Jews. And so they've exalted themselves, thinking they have all this power and all of this might. And believe me, what's going on in Chicago and Portland is a part of this very deal. Because what is going on in Portland and Chicago is a part of the Red-Green Alliance, and it's connected to China. And I'm going to make a connections to China in a big way here in a few minutes. But what are they doing? When you go to the UN, they make this uproar, you know, and I want to mention something that happened at the UN that is absolutely a picture, a biblical picture of, it's like they're just living out prophecy. Netanyahu gets up, and what happens? Everybody walks out, right? But the terrorist president leader of Syria, who's a terrorist, he's an ISIS terrorist. He is an evil, wicked man who's murdered American citizens. He's a murderer. He got up to speak at the UN. Why are we even letting this Giuliani whack job into our country? Why wasn't he arrested immediately and put on trial and executed for the murder of so many Americans? Because he's nothing but a wicked, evil terrorist planning on murdering Christians and planning on murdering Jews. That's all he is. And he gets up and speaks, right? And everything he says is against the Judeo-Christian ethic and worldview. It is a complete picture here of making an uproar and hating, okay, the living God. They hate you, God, right? They are the enemies of our God, it says here in Psalms 83:2. And so Giuliani is a part of this Red-Green Alliance, and he has plans for a huge terrorist attack in the United States of America. I'll explain that when I get through these verses and explain the tie to China. Okay? And it says, they make shrewd plans against your people and conspire together against your treasured ones. Okay, so they are making shrewd plans. This guy is one shrewd ruler because he came in, all of a sudden he took off his terrorist stuff, put on a suit, and the United States State Department and others are trying to, work two ends against the middle. Again, I hate it when we do this, but they're trying to use Giuliani to try to help bring peace to the Middle East. That's never going to happen. Not with a guy like him, because he is dedicated to the death and destruction of the nation of Israel and the murder of every Jew in the world. That's what he's dedicated to. And so he's making shrewd plans. He's conspiring. And then it says, verse 4, they have said, come, let us wipe them out as a nation, that the name of Israel will be remembered no more. So, they're over in Egypt today, and they're trying to make this deal with Hamas. It's never going to happen, guys. This deal with Hamas is foolishness. Already Hamas. I just went on Times of Israel just to look at the headlines. And here's the headlines. Trump says deal's almost done. Right under it, official from Israel says that deal's never going to get made. I mean, this is just like, it's crazy. Okay, to think that Hamas would give in to giving all of the hostages back, they know that if they have hostages, that weakens Israel because Israel's so divided. If somebody gets, taken as a hostage, they hold them hostage. There's people in Israel on the left and in the center that say, give them everything. And they right now want to give 2,500 terrorists. I think about 500 of them are actual murderers. They're in jail in Israel for murdering Jews. And Israel's actually thinking about giving those guys back. And I'm horrified. I mean, can you think of anything more unjust and evil? And this is what really fuels the desire of Hamas and Al Qaeda and ISIS and Giuliani and all these people against the Jews, because they see them as absolutely incredibly weak. If you give 2,500 prisoners back and 500 murderers back to get 42 people back, hostages, most of them not even alive, and you're willing to do all of that to get, and Israel's been doing this constantly. For one man, they gave up over 1,000 terrorists, and I'm kind of baffled, and the weakness to think, when we went to fight World War II, when we invaded, North Africa and then Sicily, and then into Italy, and then we did D-Day. Nobody was screaming at America, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this because you're not feeding the German people. I mean, it's just nuts to think you go to war and then the whole world says you got to feed all these people, your enemies. No, you're going to war, you're fighting. And it is kind of a ridiculous kind of thing. And let me read verse 5 and I'll stop there, because this is really what spiritually is happening in the world. What is happening spiritually in the world right now is a result of what God prophetically said here in Psalms 83, verse 5. It says, they have conspired together with one mind and against you, God. This is to God. They make a covenant. And this is all they're doing. They're making a covenant. They've made a covenant, and they are planning on attacking Christians and Jews in America right now. Okay? So the director of the National Counterterrorism Center in the United States warned just a few weeks ago, not even a few weeks ago, just a week ago, because this was September 25th, Joe Kent said, at present, the Muslims in this country who have been coming in, building terror cells all over the nation, are getting ready to have a 9/11 attack on the United States. And so I want to focus down on this because this is actually being funded and helped by China. China is doing this very thing, and this is at the heart of what's going on in Chicago, Portland, the attacks on ICE. It's not just the fentanyl problem, which they are putting here in the United States. It's not just through the drug cartels, Mexican drug cartels, but it is also through all of the Islamic centers in this nation that are being funded and fueled. And they did this during the Biden administration when they came across our southern border, and they've been put all over the place. And this Giuliani from Syria is one who helped put this all together. So let me just say what they were saying from the National Counterterrorism Center was that the big picture is that the Taliban in Afghanistan was organizing this with Hamas, Iran, with Giuliani, and they were building these terror cells in the United States so that they could attack. They call it the United Resistance Council. The United Resistance Council is that all of these Muslim groups can join into this council, okay? And what they have is they have Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, Giuliani, Al Qaeda, all of these groups, ISIS, all of them have sent groups. So it's not just going to be Hamas. So this peace deal that's going on in Egypt is a nothing to them because they're all uniting for an October 7th attack on the United States. This is what they're doing. And so I was listening to one of the CIA terrorist experts. They were on the Officer Tatum show. Officer Tatum has this podcast, YouTube channel that I listen to sometimes, and he is a believer. He's a Christian, and he was talking with this gal. He's had her on before, and she was talking about the United Resistance Council, and she was freaking out how Giuliani went to the UN and did this, and we didn't arrest him. And what I wrote down in my notes was that they decided a few years ago in 22 that they needed to attack America. They needed to go after America hard, and they had already planned to do the October 7th in 22, but that was a precursor to what they're going to do in America. So this was even a practice run for what they want to do in America. And so she's talking about it. She's like, they have 12 terrorist training camps that are in Afghanistan, Syria, and different places. And what they're going to do is they want mass casualty events. One is they want to get on planes and blow themselves up. So that somehow they're going to try to get suicide vests on their guys to, yell their stuff and blow up and planes come down. Okay, that was one of the things. The other thing is that they're training them into 5 to 10 man teams in our communities, and they are going to strike churches, synagogues, grocery stores, malls. They're going to go and just kill indiscriminately people, and this will be part of their, duty, Islamic duty, I guess, to come and kill Christians and Jews in America and attack America. But why? Because America's the big bad bully, and we are helping Israel, and they hate that. Okay? China is helping them. All right? China is helping fund them, just as they're funding and helping the Mexican cartels. And so I want to show some books to you. I'll pull them up. And as I pull them up, I'm going to talk about these books, okay? And let me go ahead and just share the screen here and read this one to you. This is called Deceiving the Sky, okay? Inside Communist China's Drive for Global Supremacy, was written in 2019 by Bill Gertz. And Bill Gertz is one of my major guys that I followed, and I've read most of his books. I'm going to pick up some of his books here that I have, and I'm just going to read the from the jacket here that's on the screen, and then I'm going to go back and read from the book and talk to you about what happened in 2017-18 that really changed the calculus for what China was doing. And I really, at some point, want to talk about what's happening in China right now today, because I think it's very important for you to know what is happening. So he says the United States' approach to China since the communist regime in Beijing began this period of reform and opening in the 1980s was based on a promise that trade and engagement with China would result in a peaceful democratic state. So the State Department went bonkers. They believed that if they engaged China, and I've read, guys, I've read many papers on this, and obviously in some of these books that I've read on this battle with China, the United States and our people believed that the more we engaged them economically, the more we had trade with them, the more we went there, we can convince the communists to give up communism and come to the West. 40 years later, the hope of producing a benign People's Republic of China has utterly failed. The Communist Party of China deceived the West in believing that its system and the party-ruled People's Liberation Army were peaceful and posed no threat. In fact, these misguided policies produced the emergence of a 21st century evil empire, even more dangerous than the Cold War version of the Soviet Union. And it's really sad to think, guys, that over and over again, every single president, okay, whether it was George Bush or Clinton, the next Bush or Obama, every one of them got in bed with the Chinese. Every one of them. And it's a sick picture of the way that the Chinese deceived America and bought off people. They bought off senators, they bought off congressmen and governors and mayors, just bought them off, and so that they would do the very thing. And I wrote about, what happened with Gertz, because he was writing in the Washington Times and saying to everybody, listen, this is their plan. Their plan is unrestricted warfare, asymmetrical warfare, until they destroy the United States of America. That's their plan. And they've been working that plan. And so Gertz, I'm just going to read this. I wrote this about what he had said. He was interviewed about it. I listened to this interview. And this is what he said in 1999. Gertz was writing a story on the Chinese military, the PLA, for the Washington Times. The Pentagon was in the grips of a Chinese information warfare, only telling Americans what China wanted America to hear. Okay, so they were being directed by our own government to only say that China's not an enemy and they're good guys and we can work with them. Okay? And so Gertz went for a background briefing, and at the end of the briefing, a colonel came in and said, the general would like to see you. Somewhat ominous. Well, the general turned out to be the director of the DIA, and he sat down at the end of the conference table and said, Bill, China is not a threat. And my first response was, well, why do you think that? He said, paraphrasing, because they said they are not a threat. So China bought off everybody. He bought off the Clintons. He bought off everybody. And that's one of the sad stories, of this whole thing. So let me just read, from the book here. And I just got a few quotes. So this is, it's a sad picture, okay? He said at the beginning of the book, the highest levels of U.S. government were uninformed about a threat posed by the Communist Chinese, and they adopted the false ideas and concepts about its system and its activities. And he does go in and talk about the ones who weren't deceived, who went along with this. He warned that China's communist rulers very well could conduct a preemptive Pearl Harbor like surprise attack on the United States and its allies. Now, he wrote this in 2019, but I am telling you right now, from what I'm listening to from military uh, people, is that a Pearl Harbor attack is coming on the United States. Okay, so 4 months ago, all right, and let me just pull up this information here, and I'll tell you about this. I actually listened to this 3 times, and I wanted to get this information into my head. Okay, um, this was a um, lecture by Brigadier General Doug Wickard from the 412th Test Wing Commander, and this was 4 months ago. Just 4 months ago. Okay? And over an hour, he said we had a technological advantage over Russia and the Warsaw Pact during the Cold War, which led to the defeat of the Soviet Union. We do not have that same advantage over China. China is actively preparing for war with the USA, and they are ready to go by 2027. And he gave all of the information about how they're going to attack us, how they're attacking us right now. And everything he talked about, I remember from this book, Unrestricted Warfare. This is China's master plan to destroy America. And the guys who wrote this book are Colonel Zhao Ling and Colonel Wang Jingzhu from the People's Liberation Army. And this was a white paper on how to destroy America. And we got it, the United States got it and published it. I bought it and read it, and I've read it many times since, just to say, geez, these guys are doing these very things, and what are we doing to stop it? And nobody did anything to stop it until Donald Trump's first, when he came into office, right, in 2017. He was the only one who stood up to fight them. So back to the book, okay? And this is what even the book said it in 2019, okay? And let me just kind of read this. 20 years after these events of 1999, another DIA director had a far different take. Army Lieutenant General Robert Ashley presented a stark contrast to the ill-fated views of China under previous administrations. Ashley revealed in a DIA report that communist ideology never changed as a motivating force for China's rulers. The revolution that brought the communists to power in 1949 under Mao, considered among the worst mass murderers in history, drove Chinese leadership in Beijing to order force against the United States, first in Korea, later when the Chinese military forces provided air and air defense support to Hanoi in the Vietnam War. Okay, and then he goes on to say, this guy, what did he say? Well, this was during the Trump administration when they started going back after them. They started attacking them, the Chinese, and Trump stood up against them and started stopping things in the United States. Well, obviously, they did everything they can to get him out of office. Now he's back. Things are different, okay? This is what it says. The goal is twofold for the Communist Chinese: to restore what communist leaders believe is China's rightful dominant place as the leader of the world, and second goal, destroy the United States of America, this is what unrestricted warfare is all about. And how are they going to do that, okay? And asymmetrical warfare for them is like, you can't go head on and fight America head on. You have to do this by 1,000 pricks, okay? This is what they're doing. And so it goes on to say in this book, until the election of President Trump, the People's Republic of China was close to achieving many of its objectives. But under Trump, the United States took a major shift by recognizing in ways that were never done in the past that Beijing was engaged in undeclared war, played out in the economics and technological and cyber realms. And that's the interesting thing to say in the cyber realms, because China has more hackers, all right, in cyber warfare attacking the United States. They have more hackers than all the nations of the world put together that are at work, and they are attacking us. So back to that, Brigadier General, 4 months ago, he talked about several of their operations, and their operations were they have malware installed in almost every system that we have in the United States of America, in electric, in water, everywhere, banking, to attack us. And this is one of the things that people believe is going to happen, that they will attack and try to shut down our electric grid and many other things that they're going to try to shut down, because they have to put down America to lead the world towards their version of, the communist version of ruling the world. All right. And then they'll have this wonderful heavenly kind of thing, the mandate from heaven for China to rule the world. That's what they believe. And here's the interesting thing. We know, who know the Bible, realize, well, it's not going to be China, right? So communism wants to take over the world. Islam wants to take over the world. They want to rule the whole world, right? The elites in Europe want a one world government. They want to rule the world. Well, you can't have three guys ruling the world. We know eventually the world's going to be ruled by one guy, Antichrist, and everybody's going to come under him, and he will declare himself God. And well, that's not going to work. That's why it only lasts 7 years. I mean, you imagine the amount of chaos, that's going to come from this whole thing. And so we know scripturally this stuff is not going to work. But still, to this day, all that time, I'm reading, these books by Bill Gates, several of them, and other authors that are writing about the same thing, okay? And I'm thinking, what is America doing? Is America doing anything to stop these people? But it wasn't until Trump came along, and now Trump once again, and we'll look at an article here, in a second, okay? So in 2018, the Trump administration took an unprecedented step. For the first time, exposed the activities of one of China's most important spy masters, PLA Major General Zhu Xiaobi. Liu, for many years, headed 3PLA, the primary actor behind the relentless campaign to steal through cyber means the crown jewels of American economic and defense secrets. Well, they did this easily under Bill Clinton because Clinton just gave it to him. Hillary Clinton just gave it to him. And Hillary Clinton's got blood on her hands because when there was one guy trying to defect from China, and this book talks about it, she turned that guy back over to the Chinese, and then they killed him. I mean, this is a wickedness that is just really, really hard to believe happened in the United States, okay? One more quote, and this was from Vice President Mike Pence, voiced that the United States' concerns about Chinese technology control described an unparalleled surveillance state that is growing more expensive, intrusive, often with the help of U.S. technology. The Great Firewall of China, used to censor the internet's expanse, became more sophisticated at preventing Chinese people from obtaining free, open, uncensored news and information. By 2020, China's rulers aim to implement the Orwellian system premised on controlling virtually every facet of human life, the so-called social credit score. Now, we've talked about this before, and I'm not going to read any more, of this book because this will get too long. It's already 8:38. But the idea here that I'm trying to say is that China right now is pushing very hard. They have to do this by 2027. And so let me read from the paper that I wrote. Some of you will be getting this, I said this in the book, in the paper. Reading Bill Gates' books have been hard because God has blinded and hardened the hearts of so many to compromise with such an evil enemy. As a born again Christian driven by truth, it hurts to see people so deceived about such an important topic in America. And when you look at what was written in all of these books, um, it's really interesting to see how God blinded the eyes to weaken America. Trump comes in and he's like the spear, right? Like he's like a point of a spear just driving right in to these leftist things. And I think it's going to end up like this mayor in Chicago said. He wants civil war. And this is what China wants. This is what Russia wants. China's information war against the United States is very expansive. And when you compare it with Russia is not even near, even close to what China's been able to do, against this country. And so I was very interested in this article from the Atlantic Council just from a week ago. And it's a very interesting, and it made me think of how what Trump is doing in Portland, Chicago, and several of these other cities really is an attack against what China's doing through the fentanyl. So this is a very important article about that. He said, in an early move echoing post 9/11 counterterrorism strategies, the Trump administration has designated 8 major cartels, including Tren de Aragua, which they've been arresting in Chicago. And of course, the Chicago mayor hates it, and he's more in bed with the cartels, like MS-13, than he is for America, right? And so Trump has already declared them all foreign terrorist organizations, as he did today with Antifa. And I watched his interview with everybody, Pam Bondi, and Kristi Noem and Kash Patel and all of these people about Antifa and what Antifa is doing. And they are now a terrorist organization. They're going after them, okay? And this sets up the administration to potentially seek wide ranging congressional authorization for military force against these criminal organizations, similar to that which was introduced in the House in 2023 by then Congressman Mike Waltz, before he became U.S. President Donald Trump's national security advisor. Passing legislation to authorize the use of military force against the drug cartels would be an appropriate, wise response to the threat that they pose to Americans. And the problem is, too many Americans in the big cities are on the side of China and the Islamic jihadist groups and the Mexican cartels. And so you could see it setting up this division in America. It's really bad. If you watch the news, you'll see what's going on with Portland and Chicago. It's like civil war already. It's just ready to go get the arms out. This is the time where a terrorist attack like that's been planned by Giuliani and all these groups. And oh my gosh, it would be a terrible time. We got to pray that that doesn't happen. Okay, here's the rest of the article. It says, perhaps the most alarming is the emerging evidence of Chinese involvement in the narcotics trade. Intelligence reports indicate that Chinese companies, after often operating with apparent impunity, supply Mexican cartels with fentanyl, the precursor chemicals, while providing critical financial infrastructure for money laundering operations. These Chinese doctrinal concepts of unrestricted warfare proposes multiple indirect approaches for undermining strategic competitors, particularly in the United States. Okay? The Heritage Foundation put out a study in September 2024, so this is just, a year ago, and it said that China's facilitation of fentanyl trade into the United States caused approximately 200 deaths a day. Every day, 200 people die in America from fentanyl overdose, and it cost our economy $1.5 trillion. And that's part of their asymmetrical warfare. That's what unrestricted warfare talks about, how they're going to attack the United States. And so That is one of the major things we see happening in the world today. Let me pull up these articles. I think that these are some important articles that go along with what is going on. Okay, so in the Washington Times, this same author, Bill Gertz, writing in the Washington Times, wrote this article, and this is what he said. Okay, now if I can get back to it. All right, hold on one second. Okay, Trump trolls Xi for conspiring against America. This article was September 3rd, 2025. Okay, so he's trolling him, and I thought this was really hilarious. Um, he said on Truth Social, this is what Trump put. He said, "Oh shoot, they're not letting me read it. They keep kicking me off." Okay, basically what he said to them was, "Hey, give my regards to Vladimir Putin and to Kim Jong Un while you conspire against America." That's what he said. Okay, so that was September 3rd, 2025. And also on September 3rd, 2025, Xi dubbed China's Unstoppable as new ICBM's lead parade of advanced weapons. So President Trump was mocking him, for all of this stuff. Okay, on September 4th, okay, so just not a month ago, right? The State Department official was sentenced for selling secrets to China. See, it's still happening. So here you got a guy in the State Department working for the Chinese, selling them secrets, caught. And he's only caught because Trump's in office. If Trump wasn't in office with Biden, he'd be doing this and he'd be fine. Biden, Obama, all of them probably be helping him. And that would be the thing. Okay, one other article that he wrote on September 11th was China and Russia conduct their first joint submarine patrol, okay, in the Western Pacific. And so those guys are uniting together militarily, and that is a threat to the United States of America. That's a huge threat, right? And so China is, they are on the move with these things. So let me go ahead and read another one of the things that this Brigadier General said 4 months ago when I was watching his lecture out from Edwards Air Force Base. He really warned the United States, you got to get prepared. You got to get prepared for the Pearl Harbor attack. And then he explained the Pearl Harbor attack. He said, Bolt Typhoon is the name of the Chinese hacking operation targeting all of our infrastructure, water, electric, oil, air traffic. We can't get it out, according to Brigadier General Doug Wickert. Okay, this was his sobering assessment of China's growing military capabilities during a recent briefing for local leaders at Antelope Valley College. This was 4 months ago, and it was sobering. We had a technological advance over Russia. That's what I read before. And over the Warsaw Pact to help us win against the Soviet Union. But we don't have that with China, okay? So here's what's interesting about China. They have this thing called mandate from heaven, right? Xi Jinping is cursing his people, as communist leaders do. The people have lost hope. And there's a movement right now in China that once you lose the mandate of heaven, and one of the ways you find out, one, is that everybody begins to hate you. Two, the weather changes. So the Chinese people look at the weather and they just got hit by this big, huge, hurricane, typhoon, they call it over there. And they got hit with flooding in different places. And the Chinese people are angry. And some of the generals are angry, and boom, they were murdered, right? And then they brought in the 85th Army Group into Beijing yesterday, okay? Martial law. Why? Because they are protecting the place, because they're about to have their big, huge, Congress plenary session here next week. Well, they bring everybody in, okay? And Xi is trying to hold it together. Right? He is trying to hold it together so that he can lead them to this glorious victory against Taiwan and the United States of America. his economy is falling apart. I mean, it is based on some really weak things, and they are falling apart. And everything I'm reading is falling apart. So he is being judged right now, and I don't know where this is going to go. I mean, if he's is he going to launch the attack sooner because that's what these kind of leaders do, or is he going to be killed and another guy comes up? This is where it's going right now in China. And biblically, I look at that and I go, lawlessness prevails, right? Wars and rumors of wars, lawlessness prevails. Lawlessness is trying to prevail in America. This is why you have these leftist wacko leaders saying things. Can you imagine this? Okay, this guy is running for attorney general and says that he has two bullets and he wants to put the two bullets, into the Republican he's running against, and kill his children. And then the Democrats say it's okay, right? They're trying to cause all of this chaos. They want people to run. They're pushing everybody towards violence. And that's what they're doing. I mean, this is what Chicago, this is what Portland, other places are going to do it too. They're all pushing violence. It's lawlessness. And it is exactly what God said he would do to them. He blinded them and he judged them and he hardened their hearts. When I read to you from Romans chapter 1, tell me if this doesn't sound like exactly what we see happening in these cities with these leaders. I mean, seriously, okay? In Romans chapter 1, when God says this, all right, let me see here. Verse, let me find it. God gave them over in the lust of their hearts to impurity. We definitely see that in all of these cities. And then he said, God gave them over to degrading passions. Okay? And then it says in verse 28, and just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind. And that's what I see, a depraved mind. When I see this Pritzker guy, governor of Illinois, and this mayor of Chicago get up, I'm looking at people and I'm looking in their eyes. It's demonic. I mean, they've been turned over to a depraved mind. They're communists themselves. And they go along with China. They don't go along with America. They don't believe, in us. And that's where I want to bring up this other book. And let's look at this book here for a second. I'm not going to read this book, but look what it says, Treachery. He wrote this book, Bill Gertz wrote this book in 2004. I marked it all up and read it back then, and I couldn't believe, okay, this is how America's friends and foes are secretly arming our enemies. And he goes, country by country, how all these countries are against us and all working to get rid of America, all right? In this stunning New York Times bestseller, Treachery, Bill Gertz blows the lid off the dirty dealings of our so-called allies. Gertz's groundbreaking reporting exposes how France, Germany, Russia, and supposedly other friends of the United States arm the world's most dangerous tyrants and terrorists, putting America directly in the line of fire. And I'm not going to read all the chapters, so I was planning on doing that because, time is getting really short here. I just think this hour goes so fast. It's crazy. We need to pray because the Muslims are not going to give up. They want to hit America. They want another 9/11. They want an October 7th in America where they can cause all this havoc, pain, so that they can get rid of any freedom-loving people. They just want to get rid of us. And that is one of the things that you see happening before the rise of the Antichrist. And this is why I say we live in the last days, right? I am seeing revival happening, okay? I see it in a lot of different places. I see people turning to the Lord in a wonderful way, right? And Many people have written books. I think Tom Cotton wrote a book about this, talking about China and I mean, this is a new book, and that he just wrote about it. And so other people are seeing all of this stuff happening. What is America going to do? What are we do? Well, we're standing up for the truth in a lot of different ways. But then when I see Trump do what he did with Israel, I just start to cringe, because the first time he was president, and he, did this peace to prosperity thing, the deal of the century, and as soon as he came public with it, boom, we were hit with the coronavirus. Now he's pushing it again, and he thinks he can make a deal with Qatar, forcing Hamas to give you know, give uh, these terrorists, to give all the people back that they kidnapped and they murdered, and they think they can control the Gaza Strip now with Muslims. And Israel's just going to go along with this. Here's their problem: it's not Israel. God is not going along with it. God prophesied that He's giving that land back. So I hope and pray America, in this one instance, does not stand against the living God. I hope and pray it doesn't happen. And we need to pray for that. And we need to pray for our American brothers and sisters here in our own country. I think of this often, that when God sent his people into captivity with the Babylonians, he told them, seek the welfare of the place where I've sent you into captivity. Pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare is your welfare. And I think of Daniel going and praying that, and seeing his welfare was bound to the Babylonians. And God did prosper him and help him, but he stood firm for the truth all the way through. I pray that same thing for us as Americans. I'm praying, like, we are here, and we're here in a place that's not ours, right? Our home is not here. It's in heaven. Be in the world, but not of the world. And that's who we are. But I'm praying that God would cause us to continue to prosper, to walk in his ways, and to stand in the gap for America, so we can see more and more people come to Christ before that day when God says to Jesus, go get them. All right? That's going to happen pretty soon. Well, with all that said, let me just say, since it's already almost 9 o'clock, thanks, guys, for listening. And I hope this was a benefit to you, to encourage you to pray, look to the Lord. America's still hanging in there. The Christians are still hanging in there, doing great things in America. Let's keep praying that God keeps doing this. And if you don't know the Lord, I'll just encourage you to go read John 5:24 and ask God, open your eyes to see the truth of John 5:24, because he said, truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life. He does not come into the judgment, but he's passed over from death to life. Jesus, when he said this, he made an incredible promise. He's the only one who can save. He's the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father but through him. So I pray that your eyes are open, you hear his word, and give your life to him. I pray for you. And I pray it in Jesus' name that it would happen. Thank you, guys, for listening and being on the program tonight. Appreciate every one of you. Bye-bye.